You're about to watch the conversation between me and Senior Data Lead Avi Marco on using COVID lockdown to best prepare your data estate for the future. He's going to hear some really practical, creative tips on how we can use this time effectively, both as data leads and data professionals. I'm Keith Robinson, Director M&I Data. We work with companies to do more with their data through our unique services, mentoring, training, and augmenting your internal capabilities. We're going to dive straight into the conversation. So if you haven't already, please subscribe to our channel and watch out for more data-driven content from M&I. Thank you.
Actually, we have a bit of an opportunity here, and at all stages in this, when we've spoken, I've tried to look for the opportunities in the challenges of what we're doing. And I think that time that we now have is a luxury in some ways. That time is something that we never had before. And I'd almost take it back to what many of us are sharing socially that we're doing at home. We're doing the odd jobs that we've always meant to get round to doing, but never quite had time to do. So it kind of makes sense to do the same thing in the workplace. Let's think about those things that we've always pushed back because something else got in the way. It seemed like just a bit too much like hard work, or maybe it seemed like a bit of a luxury. And let's start thinking of those. And I think that as we've transitioned now beyond the initial crisis stage where everybody was adapting, and you'll remember those first 3 to 4 weeks as we were adapting to this, in many ways, this is now the new normal. So what do we do? So I've thought about 5 things that you might want to do, and the list actually could be much longer. An area that sort of jumped out for me is that data platform and usage piece of really taking the time to step back and work out exactly what you have been doing, where you're trying to get to, and what needs to get done. And an example will be many companies will be in the sort of in-between phase. They'll be moving towards their cloud first approach. They'll have been migrating things. Some of their data platforms will still be sitting in data centers. Some of them will be scattered across various cloud providers. Some of them will be running inefficiently. Some of them will be running 24/7 when they really don't need to. A whole host of those sorts of questions. And I would say, if, for instance, you're a company that's kept the operations team fully engaged, you might have furloughed some other people. Why not ask your operations team to do some work while they're waiting for incidents to happen, and look at the platform and say, have we properly tagged all of our assets? Do we understand what they're working and why they're working? We might notice that assets that are still working really hard and go, well, how is that when the company is quiet, we've got less demand from our customers? Why is that asset still working so hard? What are we doing? We might have some rogue processes running that we've never noticed. A whole host of things you might want to be looking at. And it's perhaps also an opportunity if your architects have got a bit of time on their hands, which is quite possible if some the more substantial programs are in a bit of a hiatus, is to say to them, let's have the conversations that we've never had time to have. Let's have those calm, open conversations while we have this luxury of time. And let's look at some of those things that you've been thinking about and perhaps never dared to utter, because you knew you'd get shot down, and everyone would go, no, not a priority. And let's sort of have that conversation. So I would suggest using the technologies that we have and have a workshop. Get your team together on Zoom and actually spend some time thinking, collaborating, and enjoying each other's company around platform infrastructure.
Yeah, and that's two really good points in there. So what you're saying is taking advantage of this sort of time off the hamster wheel, as it were, to really think about with a clear head, take a breath, take a step back, and think about what are we doing and what do we need to tidy up and tighten up in our strategy.
Absolutely. And particularly because we will be seeing very different usage patterns at the moment. It's a real time to step back.
Absolutely. Yeah, that other point about enjoying each other's company, I think that's a good point as well. Just in this climate, just making it lighthearted and fun, just saying, right, blue sky thinking, what do you think? Let's bounce some ideas of each other, and having it as a positive a positive activity for the team while all distributed. I think that's really powerful.
Yeah, and I think that's an absolute must. Because the way I absolutely find it is reimagining how you run data projects. So again, thinking about collaboration, and so this isn't specifically related to data. I think this could relate to any anywhere in the technology space, or frankly in any kind of project environment, rethink how you've worked together. How are your collaboration tools working? What new tools have you adopted? Have you now discovered that actually things can be done very effectively through online meetings, through other means? And think about what issues have been resolved. So you might have had an issue with meeting rooms when you were on site, and it was always a major frustration, and suddenly that frustration is gone. What does that mean? What does that look like? How do we carry that forward when we resume normal service, whatever that might be? You might be looking at new barriers that have emerged. So how do you deal with the member of the Scrum team who's always reticent, doesn't want to raise their voice even when you're meeting in the same room? How do you deal with that in a remote context? So that's one, so that reimagining. One I would look at, and I might throw in an anecdote into this one, is looking at your data taxonomy and classification. And the example I'm going to use is one I was playing with the other day. I clearly had one or two moments on my hands as well. But if you have a garden, or you just got a flat and you grow some house plants and stuff, looking at your plant pots. So I pulled them all out of the shed and this vast array of plant pots, and I sort of sat down and thought, how might I sort these? Do I do it by the shape of the pot, by the size of the pot, by the color of the pot, and various other things? And yeah, one of them is because I just wanted to restack them back in the potting shed, but actually it presents a bit of a data problem. How do you do that? Do you classify them by what they're made of? So plastic and ceramic. Do you do the ones that are patterned or not patterned? All sorts of questions. And then I thought to myself, maybe throw that out to the team as a fun kind of problem. And particularly to people who are less savvy in the issues of data classification and data taxonomy, and say, here's a picture of 60 pots. I want you to work out a way that you would sort them, and just as sort of as a humorous exercise, and let's come back in half an hour or whenever, and talk about that. And I think that would be one way, for instance, of getting people to understand some of the complexity of management of data, of how you classify things.
So what you're saying is almost gamification of these concepts, using sort of real life examples that are sitting in our home for this current period.
Absolutely. And, again, take elements of this new experience and try to turn them to some kind of useful advantage. And I think that sort of leads on to the fourth issue, which I would say is experiment. So here's a chance, if you've got your analysts or your data scientists still working, and you're not being driven, as you mentioned, by producing some immediate insights. Perhaps you might be a company working on the front line, servicing key workers or various other things. You may have very, very clear priorities. But if again you have got a bit of luxury of time, you might want to set your data scientists and analysts thinking, and ask them to push the boundaries, ask them to think differently. And the reason I sort of throw that one in is because we're all thinking differently right now.
Yeah.
Every single one of us is dealing with something that we hadn't dealt with before. So we've all proven to ourselves, even those who thought that they're not particularly creative, we've all proven that actually we can adapt, we can do things differently. And that's always been a bit of a strapline that we've talked about doing things differently. But truly, we've proven that we can. So why not unleash that sense of creativity, and again, almost turning on the head the negativity and turning into that sense of creativity, and say, what else could we do with our data? What questions might we be asking of the data that we haven't thought about before? And I suppose that comes to my fifth point, which is engagement with team and stakeholder. So actually using this opportunity as an opportunity to engage more. Now, again, I draw on the parallel that we're seeing in the non-work world, where people are saying, I'm using the phone more than I've ever done. I'm actually having conversations with people. People are, it was a great one, reflection over the Easter period, and then also you had the Jewish Passover, sort of two significant communal type events where people said they thought going into online services was going to be a problem, but actually what happened was people attended services who never normally go to church or go to synagogue.
But a really important point you said right at the beginning, just highlighted again there, is stakeholders, not just your own team. So let's not get siloed in your own data team. Let's make sure the comms are open across the business. And maybe, as you said, this is a great opportunity to get the creativity flowing throughout the business about how can we use data more creatively, just get the ideas flowing.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, I think this is the real opportunity to embrace, because everything is changing. That means that everything is changing. And because everything is changing, it allows us to do things that we may not have given ourselves permission to do. And so, in the data space, let's really take what we, in many ways, intuitively understand. Let's really explore that and get people thinking in data terms. So, the plant pots one was one that was fairly trivial, but I'm going to use one that I think is much, much more serious as an example. So if you're following on social media, there's a degree of distrust emerging around the statistics that the Department of Health is producing over the tragic loss of life that we're seeing from COVID. And people are saying, well, they're only tracking death in hospital and people are dying in other circumstances. And why is the Office of National Statistics only producing statistics 2 weeks before? And what are the rates of death in this country? Why do they look so different to the rates in France and in Germany and everywhere else? And what's emerging is the beginnings of a lack of trust in data. Now, for those of us who worked in the data space, that'll be a very familiar feeling when your stakeholders, when your senior stakeholders start to lose trust in the data. We've all been there. We've all experienced that. Here we're seeing this as a collective experience. And I would take that out to my stakeholder group, to my data team, and say, what would you do? What are the issues that need to be addressed here? Let's become part of the conversation. Let's become part of that national conversation in a constructive way. That's just one example of something that you might use as a means of engaging with people. And you'll start to surface some of the real challenges that are being experienced on the front line. The question of the ONS, why is it 2 weeks behind? Because it's always been 2 weeks behind. It never used to matter. It matters now. How do you then translate that into your workplace for things that never used to matter but matter today?
Yeah, I think that's a really good point, just on agility as well. So just what this is highlighting, that example within businesses, is how agile they are and being able to pivot and generate data quickly to make decisions very quickly when there's a crisis. And I think the more agile, this is going to shine a light on the businesses that have got those agile capabilities, agile inverted brackets. But yeah, I think that's a great example of the ONS sticking to their sort of 2 week piece, and that's proving out of date in this current crisis.
Yeah, it's just not good enough.
Yeah, not good enough. Yeah.
Yeah, and there'll be all sorts of great reasons why they're in the situation, and I have no doubt they're doing their absolute best.
Yeah.
But then you've got to start thinking creatively. What do we do to change patterns? How do we modify the ways in which we work? And again, taking that back and then looking at back to that taxonomy question. How do we classify things? Helping our stakeholders understand why that matters so much.
Yeah.
And again, we've got some real world examples that everybody is living and experiencing, and these are and I don't want it to sound cynical, but in the sense of these are opportunities to educate people about why data quality matters, why timeliness of data matters, why we focus on the important data points, the metrics that really matter, the metrics that govern behavior. And suddenly we have an entire nation, everybody has suddenly become experts in KPIs.
Yeah.
And we're all sort of juggling and say, is it infection rates? Is it this rate? What will determine when we come out? And everybody's having this conversation. So use that opportunity to engender a conversation within your organization.
Yeah, that's a great point. It's just using this as the sort of countrywide, the global conversation as a driver of a more data-driven culture within your business, by just saying, look, reflecting back to them, this is how the world is now interacting with this crisis, and this is how we need to interact with our business.
Yep.
And we're going to have 2 or 3 key metrics. We're going to trust them, going to be reliable, and we're just going to be consistent with those 3 or 4 metrics.
Yeah, and if we learn that they're wrong, we learn and then we adapt. And it's getting those things that perhaps as data professionals we've been trying to drive home for a long time. But at the same time, as we've also said, it's time to clean house as well. What really won't be acceptable at the end of this is for data teams to sit there with the same backlog they had at the start of the journey.
Hi everyone, me again. Thanks for watching to the end. If you're interested in having an informal, detailed conversation with Avi about how you can best prepare your data estate for the post-COVID era, get in touch now by filling out the contact form below or clicking on the link to take you to our site, and we'll be in touch. And I look forward to seeing you again real soon. Thank you.